Welcome back, everyone. Our next program topic, we will get started on Microsoft Word for lawyers. Joining us this afternoon, we are very pleased to have Alex Paykin. He's the managing director and sole owner of his own firm. He has expansive and diverse entrepreneurial background. Before he became a lawyer, he actually became a CEO of a financial loss mitigation company. His business experience allows him to offer more than just the average commercial lawyer. He is also committed to the profession and increasing awareness for lawyers when it comes to technology. Alex is a very active member of the association's Law Practice Management Committee. He is also a very active member and will soon be appointed the vice chair, co-chair of the Committee on Technology in the Legal Profession. He's a frequent speaker and lecturer for the New York State Bar. We are very lucky to have him here to give you a nice overview of Microsoft Word, key skills and tips for lawyers. Without further ado, please welcome Alex Paykin.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Kathy, for the introduction. So for everyone here, I'm Alex Paykin, as I'm sure you already know, so I'm going to skip the rest of that slide. You also have all these slides available to you as a download, so if you don't get a chance to read anything on the screen, don't hesitate, don't panic. You will find that you have a copy of this available to you later. So what we're going to discuss today primarily is Microsoft Word, the way lawyers should be using it. There are some alternatives out there, but in practice, you will find that just about every law firm is married to Microsoft Word. There's still a few using WordPerfect, but I can't help them. There's also some free alternatives like Google Docs, but you'll find that if you go to use those, often they don't have quite the same robust level of features, but also there will be some compatibility issues that you'll find, even down to the same font not looking the same on different products. So let's start with discussing what your options are. So as I mentioned, Microsoft Word is the standard. Everybody expects work product to be in Microsoft Word. When you share an editable or redline file, everybody expects Word. When somebody sends a WordPerfect file, everybody in the email thread freaks out. Beyond WordPerfect, there really are no products that have the same level of features as Microsoft Word. Arguably, WordPerfect even has more features than Word, and it used to be the preferred favorite of lawyers. But Microsoft has just become the business standard, and in the process has become the legal standard. But today we're only going to discuss Microsoft Word. I would caution you to avoid using Google Docs for anything you're going to submit to the court. Formatting is not going to work out the way you want it to. And when it comes to the advanced features and long-term use of your templates, docx files are really the way to go. So let's discuss the Microsoft ribbon. The entire Office line, every product has a ribbon. Every ribbon is similar, but every Microsoft product's ribbon is a little bit different. So the Home tab of the ribbon gives you these basic file management tools and the ability to create new files from either a template or a blank document. Now, that was the home portion of the ribbon, that was the file portion of the ribbon. The home portion is the one most people are familiar with, and the one that has most of the frequently used features. I'm not going to bother explaining to you how to make things bold or change font size. That's fairly obvious. What you may want to be aware of is, for example, that you might not have a cross-out button here, but it does exist. And if you regularly want to be able to show the text is crossed out, if you press this little button with the arrow right here, that expands the options available to you, and you can configure which buttons appear within any given section. So this is your clipboard section you can configure. This is your font section. Each one has its own little configuration with advanced options available inside here. You can also customize this upper area and add functions that you regularly use to the strip all the way on top. That way, it doesn't matter which part of the ribbon you're in. Now, the important things for today's class are going to be the more advanced portions of Word. So the styles functions are what we're going to spend a lot of time on. How to define a style, how to use the styles, and what using the styles actually does for you in terms of later being able to automate the document and navigate through the document. The Insert tab has a lot of useful things in it. Page breaks are right here, and you'll also find that you sometimes need section breaks. I'll show you where those are later. Those are very handy for page control. Tables and all of their controls are also in the insert area. Once you put in a table, in your home screen, you will get an extra tables section that will have popular buttons for use of tables. You're not going to use illustrations very often, but they do exist. The other things in the insert section that you should be aware of as lawyers are the links portion. Back. So the links portion, which you're going to want to find, which you're going to want to use for any kind of links to NICEF or to case citations, as may now be required by the commercial division. And spoiler alert, over the course of the next couple of years, as will become required in all of New York State Supreme Court filings. So it's extremely easy. The link button is a matter of highlighting text that you want to have a link on, click that link, and then paste in the URL of whatever it is you want to link. Bookmarks can come in really handy too for navigating the document if it's big and messy. And cross-references are incredibly neat because as a professional, your documents should have all your citations correctly, especially within the document. So what do I mean by cross-referencing? Well, you're writing paragraph 86 of your affirmation, and you want to reference an argument made in paragraph 82. Now, you can put in see paragraph 82 and hard code that in there, but what happens later when you decide to replace paragraph 81 with 17 paragraphs, and 82 is now 98? Well, unless you go back and manually change that number, the reader will have no idea what it is that you're supposed to be referring to, and the paragraph they look at will contain nonsense and not what you were looking for them to have. Well, instead, if as you're typing see paragraph number, instead of typing 82, you click on cross-reference, you will get a list of all of your numbered paragraphs and all of your sections from the document. In fact, let me show that to you very quickly in a random document. So let's say I wanted to cite here to please see paragraph, and I wanted to reference this one right here. So what I would do is I would insert a cross-reference, and when I put in the cross-reference, I get a navigation. Oh, it didn't come onto this screen, it fell on my other screen, which shows me my entire document. So now if I want to cite to paragraph 10, I just select, insert, close. And if you look, it says please insert, please see paragraph 10. Now what happens if I added another paragraph here? Blah, 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 blah. Well, right now it looks like 10 is not changing, right? But here's the interesting bit of it. If I right click on it, I can update it. But I'm not going to go through the document looking for all my cross-references and updating them manually. I'm just going to hit Control A, select my entire document when I'm done drafting it, right click, update field. Now what just happened? Every field where I have a cross-reference will update automatically. So after I'm done with all my edits, highlight the whole document, update fields, boom, all of my citations are fresh and new, and I don't have to worry about what happened when I moved things around. So let's move that back out of the way and move on to here. So comments are definitely going to be something you're going to want to use when collaborating on a document, sending your thoughts to opposing counsel, your client. Pretty straightforward. You click the comment wherever your cursor is where it will hover next to, and you put in what your thoughts are. If you wanted to reference a sentence or a paragraph, highlight the whole thing, then click comment, and you end up with something more manageable that references the entire paragraph. So like that, and that results in a comment off on the side here, and you can see that it references the whole paragraph, as opposed to a comment just about a word that might call attention to just that word. Back to here, page numbers come in handy, headers and footers come in handy. Generally, you're going to find that headers and footers are not something you're going to edit a lot, other than to add page numbers or perhaps page stamping, which you most likely do in Acrobat. However, and footnotes, you should never use by manually typing in the footer. You should be pressing the footnote button, which will be in the references section that we're going to get to in a minute. To insert elements that are not, that are either text, graphic, etc., that are not going to be part of your standard editable text flow is here. Again, not particularly likely that you're going to use that a lot, but it's there if you need it. Inserting of non-keyboard symbols such as sections, trademarks, paragraphs, etc. Really handy to use the symbol tool here. However, my advice to you outside of Microsoft Word would be to invest in a legal board. I'm holding one up here, although you probably have my video shrunken because you're primarily using the screen share of the slides, but a legal board is basically a keyboard that has some certain keys that are built specifically for lawyers to be able to easily type briefs without having to let go of the keyboard to switch to the mouse. So anything from paragraph spacing to bullet points to common symbols to switching between line spacings, adding footnotes, all sorts of things can be done with just a keystroke. You might want to look into a legal board. Legal board, one word, they sell for like 50 to 80 bucks depending on the model you get. Highly useful for lawyers. On to the, where did we just end up? The design tab. Personally, I do not recommend using themes, not for legal documents. You'd have to configure your own theme from scratch, and realistically, it's much easier to just configure styles to what you want them to be and leave themes for people who are making pretty documents as opposed to legal documents. What you may find useful in the design tab is the watermark option. That is just, I find that convenient when I've got a draft in progress that I'm sending to a client or an opposing counsel, to just drop in a draft watermark or a confidential watermark, just so there's no confusion that it's not the final draft. So I don't have to spell check my interim versions, quite frankly. So on to layout. Layout's an important one. So the page setup, you should really only have to configure once. Your size is almost always going to be letter paper, except if you're using legal for some documents. Margins should always be 1 inch all around. And you're usually using one column, although depending on the formatting, you may add columns and change all sorts of things here. You can configure hyphenation here. So whether a word wraps into the next line when you're using justified, or whether it makes sure that a word fits onto the line is set here. You can even do line numbering inside here so that, like court transcripts, you can have each line have a number off in the margins. And this is also where breaks are located, both section breaks and page breaks. Now, page breaks, in case anybody's thinking, what in the name of God are breaks? If I'm halfway through a page and I finished the particular thought that I'm working on and I want to start my next thought on the next page, I would insert a page break, and then let's say I would start the next heading of my document on a new page. Now, a section break is something that's a little bit more advanced, and it alerts Microsoft Word that you're using, that a whole section has ended and a new section has begun. Why would I want that? Well, more than anything, for page number purposes. So back to my example here, and I'm going to make it a little larger here so that, well, that didn't really help. So if you look at my example here, I've got my table of contents, and the page numbers on it are I. Table of authorities is III, IV, V. And then when my brief starts, it switches to page 1. Now, this is all one Microsoft Word document, but it has 2 sets of pagination, because after this treatises, there's a section break that tells Microsoft that on the next page, you're starting a whole new section and not just a new page. So you don't see a section break here, so you're going to ask me, well, what if I wanted to delete the section break? What if I just wanted to see where my section breaks are? Well, you see this little pie symbol over here, this paragraph? This is on the home ribbon in the paragraph section, and this toggles whether you see or don't see non-printable characters. What are non-printable characters? Things like carriage return. So when you hit enter, there is a character that appears, but you don't get to see it. So when I toggle this paragraph here, you see all of these paragraph symbols that appeared. These are non-print symbols that are saying to the cursor, start on the next line. So if you look over here, this non-print character says section break, next page. When you see arrows over here, these are non-print characters that say the dots continue to the end here. So non-print characters are really important for you to be able to, A, see why your formatting might not be lining up the way you envisioned, and also to be able to easily navigate through the advanced functions that are not necessarily visible to the naked eye. What you'll also find as we go to citations later is that non-print characters are these sorts of things. The citation that we're going to mark that's going to tell Microsoft Word to put this particular NYPL 15505 into the statutes portion of the table of authorities. We'll get to table of authorities in a minute, but just wanted to show you how that looks visually. So moving on past the sections, paragraph controls over here. You can manually adjust your paragraph spacings here. You can also do it in the home screen by clicking the little expansion for the paragraph section there, or even right-clicking on text and selecting paragraph options in the context menu there. If you have objects in your document, images, tables, etc., the arrange section of layout helps you bring them in front of or behind text, figure out which image goes on top, if they overlap each other, and so on. References, and we're going to spend a bit of time later on, once we finish running through the ribbon, discussing how tables of contents are made, how citations and tables of authorities are made, well, you already have the cross-reference from before. You'll find that a few of the things in the ribbons repeat themselves in various tabs because I guess the developers at Microsoft thought that contextually it was convenient to have them next to each other. So you will find that as lawyers, you're going to use the table of contents portion just to drop one in, because if you use styles correctly, it'll create itself. You'll use the insert footnotes function to drop in footnotes as you go in a document, and you will mark your citations. Personally, I do not use the index and the captions section for graphics just because I don't see that as being particularly useful for lawyers. Mailings is definitely something super useful. I will cover that more in a more advanced Microsoft Word class. You can keep an eye out for one with NISBA. But just as a concept, this ribbon section will walk you through, one click at a time, from left to right, how to take a template document that you first create that has markers for here's where a person's name goes, here's where their address goes, etc., etc. Then you select recipients from a table that you make in Excel that has all the names and addresses and whatever other fields you need. And then you just drop in your fields, merge the document, and it will spit out as many individual documents as you have lines in your table, each one customized to the row in the table. On to review. Proofing's nice. Personally, I find that the built-in proofing that underlines things in red and blue for me as I go is adequate, but sometimes you may want to use a thesaurus, for example, or to manually go through with the editor for proofing so that it takes you from one item to the next. Usually handy if you're reviewing somebody else's work. There's also a word count tool over here, although practically speaking, I don't know that you really need it per se, because if you look again in Microsoft Word, when I'm figuring out the word count for my document, I usually use the substantive portion of the document because the tables, the signatures, the captions are excluded from all word count limitations. So you highlight just the body of your document, which if you just use word count, it will do the entire document for you. That doesn't really help you any. But if you highlight, all right, I'm tired of scrolling, let's pretend the document ended right here. If you look at the bottom left over here, you will see it says 5704 of 8850 words. So if I was looking at the substance of my document, I would be able to say for the word count certification that the substantive portion of my document is 5,704 words. Now, if I click on that, I can get a more detailed breakdown, and it opens up the same word count tool that you'd find in the review tab. So now it's giving it to me, though, only for the highlighted portion and not the whole document. So if I particularly cared how many pages those words were, or how many characters there were, a number of lines, great. Now, what you might want to include, depending on the rules of the court, is footnotes. Because if I include footnotes, now I have 5,945 words instead of the 5,704. That can obviously be a problem if the court thinks I'm trying to cheat my way around the word count limits. So be mindful of that. Make sure you account for footnotes. Read aloud is kind of a new and fancy feature, which should, in theory, let you listen to a document and, close your eyes, sit back, and see how it sounds. It's actually gotten pretty good in the last couple of years. It used to sound horrible and trip over itself. Now it reads a lot more like human speech. But occasionally it'll still trip over itself, and I'm not going to tell you how terribly it's going to handle your citations. But if you're just looking to listen to the arguments and see if it's good oratory, that's a pretty neat tool. Accessibility, you're not really going to do much with. The courts already have their own standards. Translation, again, not a likely tool to be used. Setting languages and translations can be interesting and useful if you work with international documents or with multiple courts and work on documents that have multiple languages, and you want to tell Microsoft Word that pages 3 through 9 are in French, therefore please stop marking everything as misspelled and instead factor in that it should be checking for spelling there in French. You can do that. I doubt you're going to do that much in New York courts, but it's there if you need it. Track changes. That is obviously a super useful set of tools in the review. This is where you're going to enable tracking changes, and this is where you can determine how much markup you see. So how much markup you see is going to be incredibly useful for controlling whether you're looking at what the edits are, viewing all the markup, or trying to read what the final document looks like after you made all your edits. So that would be no markup or simple markup. And personally, when I edit a document, I find that as I draft, seeing the track changes sometimes throws me off, irritates me, it's crossing things out, it's underlining things. It's just not convenient for if I'm trying to just focus on my work. So what I will do instead is I will set track changes to no markup, and I'll just edit the document as if there was no such thing as track changes. But my track changes is on. At the end, when I want to send my associate my draft and say, here's all the things I edited for you, I will switch track changes to all markup so that I can send him a red bloody document that shows all the things I had to change. That way he can focus on the edits, whereas I can focus on the document. So that's where this toggle comes in handy. And what you might also consider is the compare tool in case you don't have a track changes available to you. So let's say I send opposing counsel a contract. He sends me back, and I sent it in Word, foolishly, and he sends me back a Word document and says, oh, here, I made some changes. Well, it's a 30-page document, and I have no idea what changes you made, and I'm not going to trust you to itemize them all in an email. I have to cross-check the whole document now. While the compare tool means I don't really have to do anything. I click compare, I select my original document, I select the new document that I got from opposing counsel, and then I click compare. And it instantly makes me a red line showing all of the changes that were done to the document. So that is incredibly useful for review. Working collaboratively is also nice for just being able to see what. Keeping track changes on is also nice when working collaboratively. because it lets you see who made what changes, because it will show the different users track changes in different colors. So that's pretty handy. Now, that's the ribbon, or at least the most important bits of the ribbon that you as attorneys probably will come across. Now let's discuss blank templates and default styles. So, by default, whenever you click to create a blank document or a new document, the document will be built out of a template known as normal. Normal.x, DOTX, as opposed to DOCX. Now, what is the difference between docx and .x? A .x is a file that you can open, but when you open it, it creates a new document. The new document will have the Microsoft Word default name of document 1, or if you already have one open, document 2, and so on. It's been like that for decades. Now, let's say I create a template, let's say I create a letterhead for my firm, and I save it as letterhead.docx, that's DOCX. When I open up that letterhead and I write a letter on it and I hit save, it will save it in the file letterhead.docx, overriding whatever was there before. Not particularly convenient, since I still want that letterhead for next time and I still want it to be blank. I also want my document to be properly named, and I don't want to accidentally overwrite another document that I wrote. So if I make my letterhead a .x when I save it as a blank letterhead, when I double click on that file, I feel like I'm opening up letterhead.x, but instead I'm opening up document 1, meaning a document that hasn't been saved anywhere yet. Now, when I write on it and I hit save, not save as, but when I hit save, the save as dialog pops up, as if I'd started with a blank document that's never been saved before. And now I get to give it a name, and when I give it a name, it will save it as a docx and not a .x. So now I'll name it demand letter to Joe Schmo, enter, and now that's saved as a doc file, and the .template still exists for me to use next time. The other beauty of a .x template is that I can define my styles once and save them in that .x file, and then every new file created based on that template will have that same style. So we'll get to styles in a minute, but this is incredibly handy for not having to constantly change your fonts. For anybody who opens up a blank Microsoft Word file, starts typing, and then goes, oh, rats, Calibri again? Times New Roman, 12, 1-inch margins, double spaced. If you have to do that more than once, you did not set up your styles correctly. Because if you know you're always going to write in Times New Roman, your normal template, the one that blank documents open from, should have Times New Roman as its style for the normal type of text. Any document you use for court should already be pre-styled into a template that follows all of that court's spacing and font sizing requirements. So you should have an appellate division brief template that is 14 point. Supreme Court that's 12 point. Both of them should be Times New Roman, 1-inch all around, etc., etc. So now let's start discussing how to create a template and how to create styles. Not necessarily in that order. Let's discuss the basics of styles first. So what are styles? Well, styles are that part of that home ribbon that most people don't use and wonder why it takes up so much real estate. So let's take this document I had as an example. We're going to turn off the non-print characters so we don't have to look at all those paragraph symbols and dots. But if you look at this document, it has a table of contents, it has a table of authorities, and then it has body text with headings and subheadings and so on. If you look at my style ribbon on top here, you will find that I have a heading 1 defined, a body text defined, a heading 2 defined, and a heading 3 defined. The way I know I don't have a heading 4 defined is it's still in the Microsoft blue shades of nonsense. Because if I define a heading 4, it'll make me a heading 5. It will make you as many numbered heading levels as you elect to have. Now, right now, questions presented, if I mouse over it, you see a little tiny arrow appear to the left of question presented. That indicates to me that it's a style that is a whole heading, and I can hide it. So I can hide question presented and move on to introduction, and I can hide that too. and I can hide the counter statement of case, and I can hide point 1 and see if there's a point 2 somewhere. There it is. See how point 2 started on the next page instead of jumping here? That means there was a page break put in at the end of point 1. The point is, every one of these things I can collapse or expand on any way I want to because they're different forms of headings. Now, how did we create these headings? Well, let's return this to normal text. So first we typed out our question presented text, right? Then you could do bold, underline, centered as 3 steps, but that still leaves it as normal in the style section. Now, what does that mean to us? 1, I can't collapse it anymore. 2, in my navigation pane, so if you look over here, if you go into view and turn on your navigation pane on the left here, right now I have all my headings, but question presented isn't here anymore because it's not a heading now. And what that also means is if I look at my table of contents, right now it's still there, but that's because I haven't updated the fields yet. When I update the fields, I update the table, boom, question presented disappeared. It's not there anymore. Why? Because I don't have it set up as a heading. So let's go back to where we were. Let's ignore that we made it bold and underlined because we don't need to do any of that. It's going to do that by itself. Instead, we go to the home ribbon, select our question presented, and click heading 1. Now it's a heading. It instantly appeared in navigation. I can instantly use it to take that whole section and hide it when I don't need it. And when I update my table of contents, spoiler alert, it will reappear. Boom, question presented is now here on page 1. So that is how we set up something to be a heading. Now, how did we configure what the heading would be? Let's start with the basics. So if instead of using our template document here, we start with a file new, start with a blank document. So as you can see, normally I have slightly different headings than I do for that appellate brief. That was the appellate headings. But in case you don't have your styles configured anyway, you're going to start with normal. So you're going to right click on normal and you're going to click modify. And here you can configure the fonts, the font size, the spacing, the alignment, the tab spacing, and here is the really important one. At the bottom here, you can have a style that appears only for this document, or, really important, select this radio button for all new documents based on this template. So when I started with a blank document, that is that normal default template. So if I now change anything about this normal text in the normal template, that's how every new blank document will appear. Now I can go into more advanced formatting here and do all sorts of fancy add-ons by configuring everything about this text. Font color, highlighting, you name it. A lot of stuff we don't need. Most of what lawyers need are just going to be right here. Now, so that you select where you want it to apply, you hit OK, and you've just made your normal. I suggest, in addition to making your normal, you make at least 3 layers of headings, and you create at least 1 title. I'm sorry, 3 layers of heading, and I normally prefer a list setup. Why do I want a list set up separately? Because list and normal are 2 different things. Normal is where it's not a numbered paragraph, list is where it is. So let's really quickly try to apply that to a document. So let's say this is going to be argument section. Oh, it's already set to title. We're going to change everything to normal for now. Argument section is going to have first argument, first point of first argument, second point of first argument, and then second argument, which we don't really care about having more points. And then the actual substance, blah, blah, and quote something. So we're going to want these to be numbered paragraphs. We're going to want this to be our main heading. This is our first subheading. This is our second subheading. And now you see, I don't like how this is spaced. So what I would do is I would add space after paragraph here, right click, and update heading 2 to match selection. Now this is the really cool part. If you find that when you configured your styles in their little control panels, you didn't quite like the look of them, you wait till you start writing, and then when you see that you need to change it, you change it, highlight it, and then update heading 2 to match selection means going forward, when I put in the second argument, you'll find that heading 2, see, now has that space underneath it already. So now I want the same thing for a space here, so it looks a little bit more spacious, and I want to update that. And now I wanted to have a big block quote at the end of the second paragraph, so I may want to have something that's tabbed out an inch on each side. And because it's going to be a big block quote, let's pretend it's a good 4 sentences or something, we're going to reduce it to 1.15 spacing, and we're going to, well, that's pretty much it. So that'll be our block quote. Now, actually, I already had a block quote here. All right, well, to the extent I didn't, you would click in here, you click create a style, you'd name it block quote, and that'd be the end of that. Now, I already had block quote handy, so if I undo all of the tabbing I just did and just click block quote, boom, it just block quoted that for me. There's my second point of first argument that needs substance. Also note that when I'm done with a heading style of any sort and I hit enter, it's not going to give me another heading like it would if you were on bold, underline, italic. When you hit enter, it's still bold, underline, italic. When you're on a heading and you hit enter, it switches you back to normal text. So just be mindful that as lawyers, you might want to actually switch to numbered text, but doesn't matter. This is my next argument right here. And if I later go, oh wait, I needed it to be numbered, there it is. So this is styles and how you can use them to arrange your document. Now, let's move all this to the second page. Control Enter, by the way, moves takes you to the next page for anybody who didn't know. So Control Enter. And now I want to add a table of contents for this complicated document. How do I do that? Well, so I want my table of contents on the first page. So I am going to go to References, and I'm going to click Table of Contents. And I have some built-in tables of contents that have some styles predefined, or I can make a custom table of contents. And there's, by the way, a lot more templates online, but you don't need templates. So you're either going to use one of theirs and then highlight everything and just switch it to Times New Roman 12, or you create a custom table of contents where you will indicate how many layers of your headings you want in there. Now, since my document only has 3 layers of headings, those are the only 3 available. But I can reduce it to 2 layers. I can say 4 or 5 or whatever by changing the number here, but I only have 3, so it doesn't really matter. The formatting that it takes, you have a choice of various types of formatting. From template, we'll generally use the fonts and whatnot that you have set up. You also have options in here that allow you to set up different table of contents levels in case you're not using your numbered headings in the same way that you'd want your table of contents to appear. You can also click modify in here and tweak your tables of contents to whatever fonts you want. So as you can see, I have Times New Roman 12 because, again, that will automatically match my document. So anyway, I selected custom, I said table of contents, 3 layers from template, show page numbers. Tab leader, now that's those dots that occur between the name of the heading and the numbers. I want those. You don't have to have them, you can choose none. And the preview over here shows you what your document would look like. So I like my dots, I hit OK, boom, my table of contents just appeared. Now obviously everything happens to be on page 2 because everything was on page 2. So if instead I add a whole bunch of text into here, and let's say I make my block quote something huge. Oh, it did not survive as a block quote because I absolutely failed to paste as text only. Now I could do paste as text only, which gives me the the block quote. Or if I pasted it regularly and went, oh rats, and it's already too late because I did something else and then went, these shouldn't be numbered. Well, I go to styles, block quote, and there it is. So, as before, quote, done. So now the second argument will fall onto page 3. So now if I right click on this thing and click update field, now I haven't changed any headings, so I can select update page numbers only, in which case, boom, that just became a 3. But if, let's say, oh wait, that had to be heading 3, I mean, boom. Now, if I update this field and I only update page numbers, nothing changes. But if I update this field and update entire table, I now have that new section. So that is how a table of contents works. And that is how styles work generally. So let's see, I know I'm sharing my screen, but I'm just curious if, no, we're good, okay. So, having discussed styles, I will now tell you your MCLE verification code. Then we'll move on to citations and tables of authorities, and a few other things if we get enough time to cover them. The code is W. Again, that is W. Okay, last time, the code is W. Now, I actually already skipped ahead a little bit and kind of showed all this as we went. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides, but they're there for you in case you need to reference them later when you're trying to remember how to do this. And we discussed the page breaks. So page break is something you can do in the insert section, or you can just hit Control Enter. That also inserts a page break. So section breaks were in the layout part, and if you add in a section break, that will update the pagination, as we discussed. So in fact, let's actually do a quick demo of the section break just because it comes in handy. So let's say in this document, you know what, this is a bad example. Let's go back to the one I was just playing with that's mostly blank. Where did it go? Here we are. Okay, so if you look at this document right here, let's say I actually wanted this table of contents to be not page 1, but rather before page 1. So first off, over here, if I put in the view non-printable characters, you can see the page break. That's the thing that starts everything on the next page. That was my Control Enter. So I'm going to delete that. And instead, I'm going to insert, not insert, layout, breaks, section break. Now, you can do section breaks on even and odd numbered pages, which I find completely weird. But realistically, the only one you're going to use for legal documents is going to be next page. So if after my table of contents, and again, we don't have to have the non-printable characters visible right now. So if we want to put in our table of contents and we want it on its own section, we go into layout, breaks, next page. Now, right now, it looks like nothing really looks any different. But now, if I go over here and I do insert page number, bottom of page, I can select my page number, so there's 1. I can right click on it, and I can format page number, and I can select that I want the ones over here to be I. Okay. Now, if I go to the next page, you'll see that those are formatted 2 and 3. Why? Because on these pages, I haven't switched to that I option, and because it's a different section, but it's still on 2 and not on 1. So if I right click in the new section and I go to format page numbers, here I've selected 1, 2, 3, only I don't want to continue from previous section, I want to start at 1. And by the way, for those of you who want, you can even start at 0. But if I start at 1, now when I leave the footer area, I've got page 1, I've got page 2, and before page 1, there was page I. So now, if I right click on my table of contents and I update the field, I'm only going to update the page numbers because nothing else changed, except now it's pages 1 and 2 instead of 2 and 3. So now I have that professional looking document where my tables are in their own section with their own pagination and so on. Sections are also really handy if you're making a document where the schedules or the exhibits or the tables are built in and are not being prepared as separate files, because your document might go up to page 20 and then you do a section break and you say schedule A and you start your pagination at page 1 again, or A or I or whatever you want. So that's the beauty of section breaks, and that's pretty much it there. Now, citations and authorities, the most advanced and exciting part of Microsoft Word for lawyers. There are 2 steps to making a table of authorities. First, you mark the citations, and then you insert the table of authorities. So, how do we do that? Well, I will take a random Word file briefing of mine. Here's an affirmation that does not contain citations as far as I know, right? This is the one where we did the cross-reference example. So if I go to home and I go to paragraph, you will see that when I find a citation, where's the citation? Okay, so terrible example apparently, because there is no citation that I can easily spot anywhere here. All right, back to our other document. Let's just go from scratch. We'll take we don't need the citations to be real. We're just making citations for the moment. So whatever this was, let's cite it. So in here, we're going to add C, Joe, V, Schmo, 1, 2, 3, AD second, 1205. Okay, and for argument's sake, now I set this part to italic. I've got my normal citation done, right? So how do I make it so it appears in a table of authorities? Well, I highlight how I want it to read, and I'm going to go into my references section, and I will mark citation. Now, when I click mark citation, a dialog window opens up, like so, and it shows me which text I've selected, what the citation will look like as a short citation versus a long Honestly, disregard the short and long. The way Microsoft does it, you're just gonna use the short. So you put in the same citation again, and now you've got a category. I've got cases, statutes, and treatises as my defaults. You can create additional categories, you can delete categories if you press that category button. Another thingy shows up, and you can replace cases with whatever you might want to put in instead of it. But the point is, you can add additional ones, you can replace ones. The point is, once you've selected what your categories are, they will appear over here. So this is a case, so we'll put it into cases. And we click mark. Now, if we know this case is going to appear multiple times throughout the thing, we can click mark all, and it will do a find and marking of every one of them. Now, what just happened? When I clicked mark, you should have noticed that all these paragraphs and other symbols appeared. Why? The moment you mark a citation, it enables the viewing of the non-print characters. Like it or not, nothing you can do about it. So it's going to do that. If you want to, you can turn it off right away. But we're not going to, because we're going to look at what it just did. So I'm going to close what it did. And what you'll find it did is it added this right here. So here's my original citation. And then in here, you can basically break down how the citation looks from a tech point of view. So table of authorities, name of citation, how citation should appear, and then it goes into section 1. So now let's add okay, so I've just added another case. We're going to mark it again. Oh, damn it. I accidentally pressed mark entry. Mark citation is what we meant. Again, it's a case. Again, the formatting is fine, as is. Well, I needed to italicize it. Hold that thought. So let's italicize that. And then mark citation, mark. And again, it added this whole non-printing thing that tells me what's going on there. So now let's try adding a statute. This is not the right citation for anything, just so you know, but there it is, New York Penal Law Section 100.00 for laugh's sake. We're going to mark this citation, only now instead of cases, we're going to select statutes. Everything else remains the same. We mark it, only now look what happened here. So our categories for the citations, if you look, were first cases, then statutes, later treatises. So if you look at what it did with the citations, C1 was our first category. C2 is our second category. So if you look, you can kind of decode what it did here. So this citation belongs in category 1. This citation belongs in category 2. This is where it should print it. Excuse me. And what should now happen is if we go back to after our table of, by the way, the one thing my style setup here doesn't do is an actual title for the table of contents, and there's a reason for that. I don't want this to be part of the table of contents. I want this to actually be a heading 1. Why? Because now if I update this field and update the table of contents itself is in the table of contents as page I. So now, back to creating the table of authorities. I like my table of authorities within the I section and before the body of the brief. So at the end of the table of contents, before we get to the section break, I will hold down Control and Enter and do a page break. And on this next page, I will go into review, references, and I will insert my table of authorities. When I insert my table of authorities, here's what I get to control. Do I include all the categories, or do I just want a table of cases or a table of statutes? So I can select that over here. I can configure whether I want the original formatting in terms of italics and all that or not. And I can configure whether to use PASM or not. PASM can be really handy if I've got the same thing being referenced 125 times. And here's the examples where it gives you the print preview. So if you look in the Dravo Corp v Metro over here in its little example, it's PASM. If you don't use PASM, that same thing shows 1, 3, 5, 8, 9. It's all over the place. So it's used in PASM. So I personally like to use PASM for anything where there's more than 3 references. I like my dots, and I like my formatting to be from template. Now, the one thing I don't like here is if you look, I can see right away, cases is not Times New Roman. So I will, well, you know what? It'll take too long to modify that, but the point is I can go through each of these sections and manually tweak them. But for the moment, because we're running low on time and I kind of wanted to show you some of the other functions, we add, and actually, no, I'm sorry, it was already configured correctly because it used the, in the preview, it was using the default normal styles, but since we configured and changed all the styles, and we're using the styles from template, it did it automatically. So now, here's my table of authorities. If I disable the view of the non-print characters, here we are. Now, what, again, I don't have here is table of authorities. I can't spell, but that's okay. So I don't care whether I underlined it or not, because I'm just going to make it heading 1, and that'll take care of that. So now I'm going to update my table of contents, and I'm going to update the entire table because not only will the page numbers have changed, but I just added an extra section. Hit OK. So now I have table of authorities, and you can see I have I, 1, 2, etc. So let's say we use this case again as discussed previously, blah. See. So now I'm just referring to schmo as being in for a supra, whatever, somewhere else in the document. But I still want this reference to occur in my citation. Now I don't have the whole citation here, I'm just referring to it shorthand. So now I go back into my references, mark citation, only now, instead of just doing schmo, I select the previously used citation. So I select that Joe v. Schmo. And you see now, it's going to show me Joe v. Schmo, the long citation of how it's going to reference it. So now when I mark it and close it, you'll see that even though the printable part just says C Schmo, the table of authorities part puts in, ooh, rats, I cited it to the wrong thing. Control Z that. Oh, wait, I just screwed something up there. So yeah, I totally screwed that up. Let's just delete that. C Schmo. So I am adding the citation. I forgot to switch it back to cases from statutes. So it would have put Joe v. Schmo, but it would have put it into the section, into the statute section. That's not what I want. So mark and boom. And the way I was able to see that is because it was telling me the thread was way too long, And even though it had this quote here, it then had the NYPL and other stuff. So there's a reason for those non-print characters being visible. So now I know my table of contents hasn't changed any. I'm not going to bother updating that right now, but I'm going to update this field. And now you can see that Joe v. Schmo is referenced on 1 and 2. So now let's say I'm going to add another section, another paragraph break, so I can end up on another page. I'm going to go back to my numbered paragraphs and continue my thoughts on trains. Just like in Schmo, this was should too. Now I've got my Schmo in the middle of a sentence, but that's okay. I can still go to references, mark citation, select my case, mark. And what ends up happening now is I should have Schmo on 1, 2, and 3. When I update my table, 1, 2, 3. Now, if I go one more, it'll end up on Passim. But this is the quick overview of how to mark a case, how to mark a statute, how to mark a treatise, how to mark whatever you want, and have it end up in the table of authorities, and how to properly mark your headings and subheadings to automatically create tables of contents. Now, you'll also find that by using your headings properly, you make it very easy for yourself to navigate through your document by using this left section here. So beyond that, let's take a look at what that table of authorities looks like when we're dealing with a massive document. So if I disable the paragraph section here, this is an appellate brief that's 27 pages long, not including the, actually I'm sorry, this is in a wrong document. Where did the other one go? Here we are. This is a nice long document that's 17 pages, including the table of contents, table of authority section. And if you look, it automatically generated a table that has all of my necessary sections. I can navigate through anywhere in it. I've got my tables of authorities that show me where various things are located. Now, the only thing in my document to have been cited more than 3 times is the NYPL 15505, which was in Passim. Everything else was cited 3 times or less. So it's in numbers. The formatting all matches. The alphabetizing arranges itself. If you add an extra case, you don't have to worry about rearranging your table of authorities. It will do that all by itself. As you can see in this one, I also had treatises, so I marked a few of those along the way, and there they are. All of these tables created themselves. All of the document formats itself as needed. As you can see in this one, my normal is a 14-point Times New Roman, because that's how the appellate division likes it. All of the points are here. And if, again, the hiding of the various points can be very helpful, because what if I want to look at just points A and D within point 2, and I am just getting lost scrolling between B and C? Well, I can hide B, I can hide C, and now I've got my A and my D right next to it. When I'm ready to print, I unhide them. That takes us through tables of authorities, citation markings, and let's see how much time we still have left. We have 10 minutes left. Now, I would like to answer any questions anyone has, so if anyone has questions, feel free to start throwing them into chat. And in the meantime, I have a couple more slides in here. Non-text items in Word. Tables are probably the most useful one for lawyers. Tables are great, they're easy to create, they're easy to insert, they're fairly easy to manipulate. So if this argument, here, let's turn off the non-print characters, and we can just go to Insert, click on Table, and we can just mouse over to create the grid of our choice. Now, if we need it to be bigger than that, we can manually click Insert Table and manipulate it. We can import a table from an Excel spreadsheet. We can generate quick tables out of templates like calendars, days of weeks, you name it. But let's say we just needed a simple table 3 by 3. This column is going to need more room. This column is going to need less room. You can adjust things like that. Let's say you wanted these two to be merged. You can merge them here. You can unmerge them by splitting them like so, and then you can split the document. That creates a whole new line, which you can then line up with this one. Once you line it up, it will move again as a single line. Neat things to know about tables is they don't necessarily have to have all their borders. So you can turn off certain borders if you don't want them. You go in here and you configure exactly which borders display and in what ways. You can even create cross-out borders like so, that will indicate that a particular box is not in use. You can use Border Painter, which is kind of neat, where you can just click on lines and they will appear or disappear as needed. But that's pretty much all the important stuff of tables, at least within here. Now, when I'm inside a table, you'll find this new piece of ribbon appear, Table Design. That allows me to have Microsoft help me with more elegant looking tables, in its opinion. And I can have colors, I can have heading colors, different fades, different shades, you name it. I can also control the thicknesses of things, and I can shade manually if I really want to. That's pretty much it for what you need to know about tables. Oh, actually, the only other thing I should say is tables can be moved independently of the margins and the layout. So you can elect to have a table that's either centered or a little off center, and you can choose to align the text within any way you want to. And okay, that's probably enough for tables. We're spending too much time on them. Picture insertions, again, you can drop in images, insert picture, or just drag in a photo. You can format text to wrap around the picture or to leave the sides blank. Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to share with you guys is some keyboard shortcuts. Most of these, at least the ones on the left column, are ones you should already know. They're defaults in Windows and have been around for ages. Then there are a couple of neat ones that you might not know about. Well, Control F you should know by now. Control F you should know about. Control H is find and replace in one shot. I don't use it personally a lot, some people do. Control L, R, J, and E are left justified, right justified, both sides justified, and Control E is center. That could be handy. Now Control Shift C and Control Shift V are the ones that you really need to know about because they are very, very cool. So let's say you're working on a document and the formatting is just not right. It's all sorts of random crazy, and I don't know what it's supposed to be. So what I can do, let's say I want this paragraph to have the same formatting as this paragraph. I can highlight a portion of this paragraph, hit Control Shift C, that copies its formatting. And then when I highlight a different paragraph, I can Control Shift V, and it will fix it. Now be mindful that things like italicized formatting will then go away. If I highlight everything, it just makes it all that same formatting. So be careful when you highlight the whole text. But let's assume for argument's sake, I had an affirmation with numbered paragraphs, and somewhere along the way, my staff screwed it all up, and I've got numbered paragraphs that aren't quite numbered. I've got others that are numbered but not aligned. Then I've got numbers starting from 1 and jumping off all over the place. What am I going to do? Well, here is a paragraph that I like the formatting of. Instead of highlighting it, which takes the whole text, I'm just gonna put the cursor on that paragraph and Control-Shift-C. What does that do? That won't fix the letter, that won't fix the font, spacing, lettering, etc. What it will do is simply apply the paragraph formatting. So when I click on this paragraph and click Control-Shift-V, it now becomes a numbered paragraph. So I can click on each of these paragraphs and very quickly fix them, whether it's shifting the layout, the numbering, adding numbering, removing numbering, etc. It all gets fixed. So painting, formatting can be really handy. Also really handy for headings. Instead of having to click heading 1 every time or heading 2 every time, once I made one heading 1, I can hit Control-Shift-C, go through my document, and let's say I just typed in headings by typing text in on, the left portion of the file, and I left it for later thought. So let's see, over here, I had next main heading, and I just, as I was drafting, I just typed and kept going. Well, now that I've designated that one heading 1, and I Control-Shift-C, I can Control-Shift-V, and that now becomes heading 1 as well. So that is how Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V work. Now, the last keyboard shortcut has nothing to do with Microsoft Word. It is just a Windows shortcut. At some point today, try it for yourselves. If you want to be able to quote an image, so grab something from your calendar, from your email, from your whatever, and then drop it into a Word file or anything else, you can do that. So let's say I want a snippet of, let's say this right here. If I do Windows-Shift-S, my screen goes gray. Now, I don't think you can see what I'm doing right now in this cursor. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But my screen goes gray, and it gives me a little crosshair that I can then use to draw a rectangle of what I want to make a snippet of. So I just drew a rectangle. So that just went automatically into my clipboard. So now if I go back to this Word document and I want to have that image there, I just Control-V, and there it is. The snippet that I just dropped in, that I just copied over there, is now over here. Now you'll notice there's an alt text. This is optional, but basically what happens is, let's assume someone's visually impaired and they're not going to see the image. If they're using a tool that helps with disabilities in Word, it will read to them the document. What will it do as far as stumbling onto this image? So that little gray bit, when you click on it, gives you this alt text option, which lets you put in, this figure is a screenshot of the mark citation portion of the ribbon. And now it has that alt text that will appear for anybody who can't see the image. You can also mark something as decorative. If you mark something as decorative, it will gray out the alt text, because you're basically saying to the reader, look, if you're vision impaired and you can't see the picture, it doesn't matter, it was decorative anyway, and it'll just skip it for people. You can also do generate a description for me. Good luck with that. That will be Microsoft using its AI to analyze their image and come up with a description for you. So for argument's sake, what happens if I click one here? It thought about it and it said, we were unable to automatically generate a description for this picture. You can use the text box above to type your own description. So yeah, I don't know how good the algorithm is for actual photos, but it never works for me for screenshots. And on that note, unless I see any questions, which at the moment I do not, I believe we're pretty much done with this slideshow. So hope everybody enjoyed themselves. It is now 3:46, so we're just a single minute over. Thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me later. This page with the email address is also in the materials that you got. I am happy to have my brain picked and to answer any questions you might have or help walk you through any issue you might have when you're trying to do this for yourself.
Great. And thank you again to Alex Paykin for being a part of the Bridging the Gap program. And again, Alex has presented several programs for the New York State Bar on LPM and tech topics. So please be sure to tune in to our online catalog of programs. And he has programs that will be upcoming and scheduled. So thank you again to Alex for all of his work. And we will jump right into our next program topic. So I'm just going to stop the recording. And Sonia, I will make you a co-host. So you'll be able to share your screen.